You're an undercover corporate spy in a rival company, but you unexpectedly fall in love with a CEO. You even forget about your mission to steal secrets and betray your family's carefully planned business war for him. Yet, on the day your identity is exposed, he gently lets you go, but I proactively offer him a wedding ring and say I want to marry him. Corporate warfare. The CEOs of two corporations are fighting downstairs. One of them is my brother. By the time I rushed over to help, it was too late. My brother, trying to show off in front of the media, accidentally threw out his back while attempting a taekwondo sidekick. I carefully helped my brother onto a stretcher. A sudden sneer came from behind me. "What, you broke up with me for this kind of trash?" My brother, a prominent figure in financial newspapers, one of Forbes's top 100 young entrepreneurs. His methods were as insidious and despicable as my father's. Because of years of animosity with Hongshun Group, my brother had previously sent people to cut down 2 money trees outside their company and bribed 2 cleaning ladies to go on strike. Later, when he sent me, fresh from studying abroad, to be an undercover agent, something went wrong. The day I scurried home from Luke Dawson's company, my brother and father were discussing the grand plan to acquire Hongchuan Group. I stood at the door, cautiously calling out, "Dad, brother." Both men in the room turned around. Because I had rushed back from Luke's company, I wasn't fully dressed. The cold winter wind was biting, and my nose and eyes were red from the cold, making it look like I had been crying. I had just sniffled when my brother suddenly slammed the table and angrily said, "Did Luke's subordinates bully you?" Upon hearing the word bully, I lowered my head, feeling a little shy. The man's handsome, aloof features flashed vaguely before my eyes. The red mole on his ribs, shimmering with fine sweat, and his suppressed, restrained gasps. Then I lowered my head and said somewhat awkwardly, "Brother, actually, that—" My brother noticed something was off with me. He frowned and scrutinized me for a few moments, his gaze lingering on the scabbed wound at the corner of my mouth. His face instantly darkened, and he interrupted me. "The cut on your lip. How did you get it?" I explained, a little guiltily. "Well, brother, if I told you it was actually Luke—" My brother didn't wait for me to finish explaining. He already understood. He instantly slammed the table in anger. "What? That bastard Luke had someone beat you up?" "Last time he stole our company's bid. The time before that he humiliated me in front of the media, and now he dares to have someone beat my sister? He really doesn't respect our family, does he?" Seeing my brother's strong reaction, I opened my mouth in a daze, then silently closed it after a long while, swallowing the confession I was about to make. In the end, I still didn't dare tell my brother that the injury on my mouth wasn't actually caused by Luke having someone beat me. It was from him kissing me. Back in my room, I let out a deep sigh and glanced at my phone. There were 3 missed calls from Luke. Luke, the CEO of Hongshun Group, my brother's arch nemesis. They've been at odds for years, their business disputes escalating into personal vendettas. Now, sitting in my room, my brain, which had been buzzing with excitement since last night, finally calmed down. Suddenly, it dawned on me. Even if I risked my brother flaying me alive by confessing that I'd accidentally fallen in love with Luke, what about Luke? When he found out that I was not only his competitor's sister but also had been deceiving him for so long, with the sole purpose of bringing down his company from the start, wouldn't he despise me instantly? It was true that during my undercover work, I had a moment of impulsive passion and unexpectedly developed feelings for Luke. And then there was last night's unexpected event. Now that I've calmed down, I realize I was quite reckless. The only reason Luke has been able to contend with my brother for so long is because their cunning tactics are equally matched. Once he discovers my true identity and intentions, wouldn't he want to utterly destroy someone like me, who deceived his feelings, used him, and betrayed him? Thinking about this, I inexplicably broke out in a cold sweat. After a moment of hesitation, I opened Luke's chat window. The last message had just been sent. Luke, a man of cold and few words, was clearly exasperated by my unanswered calls. "I called you so many times, and you didn't pick up. When I woke up this morning, I thought I'd been stood up." I didn't reply. Thinking it was best to cut ties cleanly, I sent him a final breakup text, then, enduring the heartache, blocked and deleted him. To be honest, I felt a little bad. After all, Luke and I had been secretly seeing each other behind my brother's back for several months, and he had been incredibly attentive to me. But now, he didn't even know my real name. When my brother sent me to Luke's company as an undercover agent to extract company secrets, he not only handled all my background checks, but also, to avoid suspicion, even gave me a fake name. Although I didn't know how Luke would react, I was also very clear that even if Luke searched the entire country, He would absolutely not be able to find me to settle scores. Meeting Luke again was purely unexpected. He and my brother had arranged a fight downstairs at the company. The two of them had initially only gotten into a heated online argument over newly released, similar products, which landed them on trending topics. Later, my brother proactively commented under Luke's Weibo post. Tuesday at 3 p.m., main entrance downstairs at the company. If you're a man, show up. Luke had always been restrained and polite on social media platforms. His own personality was even more aloof and self-possessed. Logically, he would never engage in such squabbles, much less be so absurd as for a dignified CEO to arrange a fight with someone. But he actually replied with, "Okay," under my brother's message. At 3 p.m. that day, media reporters surrounded our company in circles. I looked at my brother, who was about to take the company executives to scout the location, and felt a bit hesitant. My brother seemed to sense my concern for him and confidently said, "Your brother is a Taekwondo black belt. Don't worry, I'll definitely help you get even this time." I remained silent until I received another call from my brother. I rushed over, but it was already too late. After all, my brother is only 28 this year, a bit too young and impetuous. He hadn't had a girlfriend for a few years, and he wanted to take this opportunity to show off in front of the media, but he accidentally sprained his back while demonstrating his Taekwondo sidekick. As the company's executives carefully helped my brother onto the stretcher, he was still howling in pain. I inexplicably felt a bit embarrassed. I was about to quietly walk away when suddenly a soft scoff came from behind me. "What? You broke up with me for this kind of trash?" I stood frozen for at least half a minute. After a while, I didn't dare to turn around. I spoke with a slightly guilty tone, my back to him. "Luke, we've already broken up." Did I say I agreed? A tall figure suddenly blocked my view. The person was wearing a custom-made suit, tall, with long legs, and faint hickeys could be seen under the top button. My gaze couldn't help but move upwards. Still that handsome, aloof face, which made me vaguely recall how he would clench his arms and grip the headboard when aroused, restraining himself. It was so sexy it made my blood boil. My heart was beating a little too fast. I had a bad feeling. The signs of being love-struck were subtly starting to appear again. Deliberately turning my head to avoid looking at Luke, I steeled myself and said to him, "It's no use if you don't agree." I'm already tired of you." Luke raised an eyebrow slightly and repeated, "Tired?" He was always accustomed to strategizing and showed no emotional fluctuations on his face. At this moment, he let out a faint laugh, but his handsome, aloof features were clouded with a shadow. "So that good-for-nothing is your new lover?" I couldn't stand Luke insulting my brother like that. I couldn't help but defend him. "Don't talk about him like that." Besides his rotten personality, bad temper, poisonous tongue, short stature, and a bit of a show-off, he's actually very capable in other aspects. My brother is indeed quite capable. After all, showing off is the nature of most men. Putting that aside, after taking over our father's company, he managed to make all the elite veterans of the company obedient to him, which already showed his remarkable skills. Fearing Luke wouldn't believe me, I added, "Really, he's better than you in some ways. For example." Before I could finish, Luke seemed to finally lose his patience, tearing off his usual restrained and proper facade, and leaned down to forcefully block my lips. He kissed with a bit too much force. I was already foresightedly thinking about how to explain the wound on my mouth to my brother later. When he let go, Luke was still holding me, his voice faintly hoarse with exhaustion. "Don't say anything more. The company was busy recently, and I rarely had time to spend with you. I made you unhappy. Come back with me. I'll buy you anything you want, okay?" I didn't answer immediately. Not because I hadn't thought of how to refuse yet, but because my uncle, who happened to be passing by the company building, was standing across the street, his eyes wide, craning his neck, trying to see who Luke was holding. Fortunately, Luke's physique was excellent, and he completely blocked me when he hugged me. I let Luke hold me, terrified and not daring to move. "No, Uncle, don't be so nosy, okay?" Because my uncle still hadn't left, I didn't dare to struggle much, letting Luke take my hand and forcefully lead me into the car. The extended business car's windows were down, providing good privacy. Luke's hand on my waist didn't let go. His warm fingertips rubbed the flesh on my waist. Luke lowered his eyes, his voice devoid of emotion. "How did you get so thin during this time?" I was terribly ticklish. Just as I was about to pull away, he pressed me back with a slightly forceful grip. "Your new lover isn't treating you well enough," Luke said indifferently, then suddenly pulled me close, ignoring my struggles, and leaned in to plant an almost brutal kiss on my neck. The vivid hickey was unmistakably visible in a spot my clothes couldn't cover. It was like an indelible mark branded onto me. Luke seemed pleased, a slight curve forming at the corner of his mouth. But I was a little dumbfounded. The injury on my mouth could temporarily be explained to my brother as having been beaten. But could the hickey on my neck also be explained as having been beaten? I straightened my expression, and when Luke leaned in again, I turned my face away, avoiding his kiss. The atmosphere in the cramped space seemed to solidify, so quiet that I could only hear my own voice. Luke, I told you, we've already broken up. I don't like this. Luke paused. The pleasant expression he had just moments ago faded, and he looked up at me expressionlessly. You didn't say that when you were with me. And now, after only a few months, you're already tired of it? Cindy, don't you have a conscience when you say these things? I touched my conscience, feeling a little guilty. It was throbbing faintly. The name Cindy was actually a pseudonym my brother helped me create. My real name is Delaney, Jennifer Delaney, the only daughter of the Delaney family. With that, Luke stood up, his face calm, the pressure around him extremely low. All right, I don't want to continue this topic. He picked up his jacket from beside the chair, his tone leaving no room for argument. There's a dress and a gift for you in the bag. Come with me to a dinner party tonight. You'll stay at my place for the next few days so you don't wander off and I can't find you. By the time I came to my senses, the car door was already securely locked. The driver took me to Luke's villa, as he had instructed, before getting out of the car. Luke started from scratch and rose to a position comparable to my family's, so his methods are imaginable. He had always treated me with extreme consideration, making me forget for a time that Luke was a formidable character in anyone's eyes. I stayed in Luke's villa for 3 hours. My brother, probably no longer in pain, was now bombarding me with calls. Jennifer, where are you? Didn't we say yesterday that it's the Smith family's eldest son's birthday dinner tonight, and no one from our family can be absent? Where are you now? I'll come pick you up. I sighed in annoyance. Both the inside and outside of Luke's front door had fingerprint locks, so I couldn't open it. I reluctantly brushed off my brother's questions. Just as I was about to hang up, the door suddenly opened. Luke stood before me. He looked at me expressionlessly, his gaze moving from my face to the phone I was on. After a moment, he slightly raised his chin and asked, "Who's coming to pick you up?" My brother heard a strange man's voice on my end and instantly became alert. "Where are you? Why is there a man talking?" At this moment, I felt a bit dizzy. I let out a bitter laugh to myself. I can't believe I've stumbled upon such a cliché and unlucky moment. The atmosphere was eerily quiet. I had a feeling that all secrets were about to be exposed in the next instant. In a daze, I seemed to have already imagined Luke looking at me with disgust and hatred, and my brother and father looking at me with disappointment. If I had known this, I wouldn't have done it in the first place. Indeed, people still need to abstain from lust. I took a deep breath, turned to Luke, and explained weakly, "No, you misheard." Luke frowned slightly. He suddenly hugged me gently, and without even hanging up the phone, he leaned down and bit my earlobe, sighing softly. "Okay, I misheard. But next time, if you're going to lie to me again, could you put a little more effort into it? Otherwise, it makes me look stupid." My face was frighteningly red. I couldn't help but let out a muffled groan. My brother's end instantly fell silent. I tried to push Luke away. He held my hand, and I couldn't move him. It was probably because the commotion on our end of the phone was a bit loud. My brother finally exploded and interrupted us. "Who the hell is that man there? I warn you, if you dare to touch my—" Luke found him annoying. He raised his hand and hung up the phone. Then he looked down at me, intimately brushed the hair from my ear, and said softly, "You're my girlfriend. Don't contact him again until I agree to break up." I silently glanced at the disconnected phone, then looked up at Luke. For me and my brother to no longer have contact, the only possibility is for him to kick me out. I reluctantly put on the form-fitting burgundy evening gown. Actually, I had thought about calling my brother directly to confess and ask him to pick me up, but Luke was constantly by my side, never leaving me. In the mirror, he reached out and put his arm around my waist, his voice a barely perceptible husky whisper in my ear. "Beautiful. It suits you very well." I have to admit, Luke's taste is indeed much better than my brother's. My brother always liked to choose dresses with skirts covered in diamonds, giving off a gaudy, nouveau riche vibe. But Luke chose a form-fitting mermaid style. The perfectly placed embellishments of jewels looked understated and elegant, so much so that when he led me to the entrance of the banquet, people passing by who knew Luke were very complimentary, praising me. Mr. Luke's taste is truly remarkable. Even the girlfriend he found is more beautiful than a movie star. Mr. Luke and you are truly a golden couple, a match made in heaven. I was a little flattered by the compliments. I couldn't help but spontaneously link my arm through Luke's and, in a good mood, praised him in his ear. Your friends all have pretty good taste, don't they? Luke paused at the sound of my words. Today, Luke was wearing a custom-tailored black suit that accentuated his height and long legs. He reached out and ruffled my hair, then whispered to me with a half-smile. Of course. You're so beautiful. Everyone will like you. Seeing Luke seize the opportunity to lean down and try to kiss me, I quickly raised my hand to block him. I was genuinely a little annoyed. How did I not notice before we started dating that Luke was so clingy? Luke's eyes narrowed. Then he gently pecked my palm. I glared at him. Keep kissing. Keep kissing. Don't come crying to me if you regret it later. Got it? It wasn't until we entered the venue that I realized something was off. Why did this place look so familiar? It wasn't just the place that looked familiar. The moment I saw my uncle and Kyle standing in the middle of the banquet hall, I almost choked. Kyle Smith, the eldest son of the Smith family. I almost forgot. Although my family and the Smith family have always been on good terms due to Luke's status, the Smith family would still invite Luke in the name of the corporation at social events. The birthday banquet invited prominent figures from all walks of life. Among them were many uncles and elders who had watched me grow up. Just outside, perhaps due to good luck, I hadn't run into anyone I knew. But now, as Luke's partner, I had to toast everyone present in that capacity, including my uncle, my dad, my aunt, and my brother. I was truly a bit disheartened. If I had known this earlier, I would have confessed to my dad and them sooner. Luke saw my face turn pale and thought I was intimidated by such a grand occasion. After all, in Luke's impression, I was still just a simple, ordinary girl until now. He squeezed my hand and comforted me, saying, "Don't be afraid. Just follow me later." I glanced at my hand, which Luke was holding so tightly I couldn't pull it away, and my face grew even more despairing. I'm doomed, I sighed. Luke was seated at the table next to mine. I kept my head down the whole way. Suddenly, my brother's voice, clearly still angry, reached my ears from the next table. She didn't answer so many calls. Just let her wander outside from now on. My heart sank a little. Then I lowered my head even further. Actually, I didn't intentionally ignore my brother's calls. It was mainly because my phone had automatically shut down earlier due to a dead battery. My dad, sitting beside me, also looked displeased. He turned his head and asked his assistant, "Where is she? Still haven't found her?" The assistant shook his head with a troubled expression. Of course, my dad wouldn't find me out there. After all, I was sitting directly opposite him. I was seated right next to Luke. If I looked up, I could see my dad's and my brother's gloomy faces. Luke was gently hooking my hand under the table. Suddenly, he frowned and turned to ask me, "Are you cold? Why are your hands so cold?" I shook my head, smiling a little awkwardly. It wasn't just my hands that were cold. My heart was even colder. More and more people came to exchange pleasantries with Luke. My palms were subtly sweating. From time to time, someone would curiously and scrutinizingly look at me. A few passing uncles couldn't help but tease Luke. "I've known you for so many years, and I've never seen you bring a female companion. This girl is indeed lovely." One of them suddenly paused, adjusted his glasses, and squinted suspiciously. Wait, why does this girl look so much like... Isn't this the girl from the Delaney family who just returned to the country? In an instant, the entire venue fell silent. Everyone knew that Luke and the Delaney family had been secretly at odds for years. Luke had been in a high position for many years and had never had any scandals. This was the first time he brought a female companion, and she turned out to be the beloved daughter of the Delaney family. The entire crowd even stopped their conversations. Everyone turned their heads in unison, looking at me with gossip in their eyes. My dad and my brother turned their heads sharply the second that person finished speaking. Their gazes were chilling. Luke, who was beside me, froze for a moment, and his grip on my hand loosened. The string that had been taut in my mind for a long time completely snapped. I felt myself starting to get a little dizzy and lightheaded. I closed my eyes, trying to bury my head in the sand. I intended to hypnotize myself into just fainting. However, before I could faint, I felt Luke's gaze fixed on me. He spoke in a cold voice. "The eldest daughter of the Delaney family who just returned to the country, Jennifer?" I looked up at Luke's inscrutable face and nodded, steeling myself. I was probably the first person to make Luke look so discomfited. Luke didn't speak for a long time. He lowered his eyes, staring at our hands still clasped together under the table, his expression slightly cold. Luke was a very intelligent person. When he spoke again, he had already figured out the whole story, and simply asked me in a low voice, "So your name is fake, your identity is fake, and your affection for me is also fake, isn't it?" Although I had anticipated this outcome, I still tried to explain, Yes, but my affection for you truly is. My brother, who had been gleefully watching the drama unfold beside me, suddenly coughed coldly. I instinctively shut my mouth. Luke wearily pressed his temples. Even though his expression was already quite displeased, he still tried to speak to me as gently as possible. No wonder you hated being with me so much after that day. Always rejecting me. A bitter laugh escaped his throat, and he slowly released my hand, saying, I pushed you too hard. I'm sorry. I stared blankly at Luke as he got up and left. Unexpectedly, he didn't harshly scold me, nor did he resort to insidious revenge. There was only a final gentleness and dignity. Luke had just left. My brother across from me was almost unable to stop smiling. He gave me a thumbs up. He mouthed, Awesome. Truly our family's genes. That move was devious enough. It was indeed devious enough. My brother had used underhanded tactics for so many years without harming Luke in the slightest. This time, I deceived Luke's feelings, directly striking at his core, but I just lowered my head and remained silent. I poured a glass of wine. I sipped it slowly, unable to finish it. I had always thought that staying away from Luke would nip this budding romance in the bud, but I overestimated myself. Only now, after truly leaving, do I realize that I was already deeply in love. Actually, when my brother first sent me to Luke's company as an undercover agent, his original intention was just for me to infiltrate and steal business secrets. Being with Luke was completely unexpected. My brother used his connections to secretly get me into Luke's company as his assistant. Because I was personally trained by my father since childhood, I also studied at a prestigious overseas university. Handling this position was more than enough for me. Before my brother sent me there, he specifically patted my shoulder ominously and instructed, Be careful. Don't make it easy for him, I assured my brother. When it comes to playing such tricks, our family is consistently insidious and despicable. During that time, the surveillance cameras in Luke's office often broke. There were often small creatures hidden in the desk. The office Wi-Fi often couldn't connect. The toilet paper dispenser in the restroom often ran out of paper. I did it all. Until one time, I bought a cup of coffee and was about to secretly pour it on Luke's jacket when Luke suddenly pushed the door open and came in. We stared at each other, both a little silent. After a while, I hid my hands behind my back and explained with a dry laugh. Slippery hands! Slippery hands! Heh heh! Luke didn't lose his temper. He just looked up at me and coldly uttered 6 words. Contact HR yourself. To stay. Because I couldn't reach him by phone, I had to go to the client company building where he was doing business and wait for him. As a result, I happened to see Luke and a woman intimately entering a hotel. Luke didn't seem right. The other boss's smile was very similar to my brother's. It looked quite sinister and malicious. I was a bit shocked. I didn't expect this person's methods to be even more insidious than mine. Before Luke entered the hotel, I rushed up and played the role of a beauty saving a hero. At that time, I was supporting Luke, who had been drugged and set up. He was walking with some difficulty, so I could only let him lean on me. Luke's usually cold face was flushed. His usual, almost pathological self-discipline and restraint could only keep him somewhat conscious at that moment. Luke's breathing became more rapid. I looked down at Luke. My face flushed. Luke's clothes were loose, and I could vaguely see his defined abs. I have to say, if I put aside the fact that he's been a competitor fighting with my family for many years, I actually have quite a few thoughts about him. But then I had just sighed, when suddenly my neck felt an itch. I almost stared blankly when I looked down. Luke had his eyes closed, his brows furrowed, leaning on my shoulder. Perhaps the drug was starting to take effect, as he uncontrollably began to gently rub his lips against my neck. I think it's necessary for me to ask my brother to increase my allowance when I get back. I put Luke on the hotel bed. He held my hand and wouldn't let go. At that moment, Luke's body was terrifyingly hot. A flush spread around the corners of his eyes. He suddenly grunted, pressing his lips tightly together, and when his fingers burrowed under the covers, my eyes widened sharply. By the time Luke woke up, the effects of the drug had worn off, and it was already the next day. He opened his eyes and looked at the incredibly messy surroundings of the bed, his gaze seemingly bewildered. His eyes paused when they landed on me, carrying breakfast. There were still scratches on my wrist from where Luke had held my hand so tightly yesterday. You! Luke's voice faltered, a little hesitant. I looked at him, puzzled. Then Luke sighed softly. Never mind. It was my oversight. Don't worry. I'll take responsibility. Take responsibility for what? I was stunned. And then, belatedly, something clicked. My face flushed again. But just because he happened to see it, he has to take responsibility for me? That's a bit much, and just like that, Luke and I stumbled into a relationship. Initially, he was only acting out of responsibility, and I, simply because I was using him, didn't choose to refuse. To better extract secrets, I practically stuck to Luke for every meal. He was a little unaccustomed to it at first, but later he simply pulled up a chair next to him for me to sit on, which made me a little uneasy. If I made that much noise in the office again, it would be too obvious. Several months passed like this, and I didn't get any business secrets. Instead, Luke became increasingly intimate with me. For example, when I accidentally fell asleep in the office, I woke up to find myself face to face with Luke, who was tucking a stray strand of hair behind my ear. He leaned in slightly, a faint smile in his eyes. "It's still early. Go back to sleep for a bit." I found this a little unsettling. Another time, I was secretly looking through Luke's files on his computer. When he suddenly walked in, my hand trembled, and I quickly clicked on the Plants vs. Zombies page on the computer. The manager who followed him in changed his expression. He probably had never seen anyone dare to play games on Luke's computer before. However, Luke just paused for a moment, then walked behind me, watched for a while, and suddenly said, "Don't plant sunflowers here. Choose this one. It's easier to clear the level." Another warm hand covered the back of my hand. I turned my head and saw Luke's incredibly handsome profile. At this moment, he was focused, personally guiding me to play a game on his computer, which was full of important documents. The manager next to us didn't even dare to breathe. My heart started to race. It felt like it was going to pound out of my chest, each beat echoing in my ears. I couldn't help it. I was falling. In my heart, I whispered a small, "I'm sorry," to my brother. I hadn't seen Luke since the day he left the banquet. I had sent Luke several apology messages. He hadn't blocked me, but he hadn't replied either. I was heartbroken. My brother and father, however, had been particularly happy lately. This was because Luke's company stock had been continuously falling for the past few days. They believed their business tactics had been very successful. They were already diligently looking for the next girl to send undercover to Luke's side. When I moved back home from the apartment Luke had rented for me, everyone in my family was already waiting for me, their faces beaming with obvious joy. My brother gave me a sports car for this. My father, with a grand gesture, told me to pick any house I wanted. My aunt and uncle each gave me a large red envelope. I couldn't hold back. I sniffled, my eyes reddening. This time, I was truly crying. After accepting all the gifts, I started to cry in front of them, saying, "Dad, I actually really fell in love with Luke." The atmosphere in the house instantly quieted. My brother, aside from his cold expression, didn't react much. He probably guessed it but had been unwilling to think about it. My dad, however, was genuinely shocked. His face alternated between green and pale. After a long pause, he said with a grim expression, "Luke is indeed a master of his craft." In the end, we still lost out. He only saw a slight drop in stock price, but we lost a daughter. My brother, on the other hand, was quite philosophical about it. He patted my dad's shoulder and said, "It's all right. Seeing Luke in such a sorry state last time was satisfying enough." It seemed my brother did have some personal vendetta against Luke. My brother turned to look at my tear-stained face, a look of disgust on his face. As he wiped my face with a tissue, he grumbled, "Stop crying. If you cry yourself this ugly again, I'll take a picture of you and use it as the company's promotional photo." Those words were quite malicious. I glared at him. My brother shrugged indifferently, pretending not to care. "If Luke sees it then, he probably won't like you anymore, which will perfectly put an end to your thoughts." I was furious. My aunt next to me comforted me. "Jenny, don't cry. What's the big deal? So what if you like Luke? Our family wouldn't go so far as to use you to pave the way for the company." I nodded and looked at my dad. My dad turned away, not looking at me, probably still angry, and just said sternly, "All right, if you've made enough fuss, let's eat first." I sniffled, a chill running through my heart. This outcome was actually within my expectations. My dad, my brother, and Luke had been fighting each other for so many years, accumulating countless public and private grievances. For them to accept Luke into our family, it was already good that they hadn't flayed me alive beforehand. The atmosphere during dinner was very silent. After dinner, my dad returned to his room without a word. I returned to my room feeling quite sad. Lying on the bed, I started counting the money in the red envelope my aunt gave me, tears streaming down my face. Only when I heard my brother and father leave for work did I open my room door. Looking down, I was startled to see a jewelry box on the floor by the entrance. I froze. Just then, a text message popped up on my phone. It was from my dad. "I promised your mom I'd watch you grow up and marry someone you love. I've been stricter with you since you were little, and now that you can find someone you love, I think it's your mom blessing you from heaven. What's at the door is your mom's gift to you for growing up. She told me on her deathbed that she hoped her child would be happy forever. And I hope so too. Tears suddenly streamed down my face. The year I first remembered things was the year my mother fell ill and passed away. I remember my mother as someone who loved freedom very much. That's why she later went to a very, very distant place without hesitation. When I went to Luke's company again, the way people looked at me was different. Gossip spreads rather quickly. The receptionist, with good judgment, told me, "Miss Jennifer, Mr. Luke isn't here today," I said with some disappointment. "Then when will he be back at the company?" The receptionist looked around warily, then beckoned me closer. "Mr. Luke hasn't been to the company for days, you know." I actually didn't quite know, but I still nodded blankly. The receptionist slipped a note into my hand and told me, "Mr. Luke's home is here. The manager told me to give it to you when I saw you." I mumbled a thank you. When I arrived at Luke's house, I rang the doorbell several times before the maid came down to open the door. Luke's house was very clean, but also very quiet. I went upstairs and knocked on each door. When I knocked on the last room, there was movement inside, but no one opened the door for a long time. After a moment of hesitation, I asked, "Luke?" No one answered. Then I pushed the door open directly. Unexpectedly, Luke was sitting properly at his computer desk. Seemingly sensing someone, Luke instinctively turned his head. He looked much thinner, and his whole body showed visible fatigue. When he saw it was me, he only paused for a moment before getting up and saying, "Why are you here?" As I stepped forward, Luke took a step back and said politely, "Miss Jennifer, is there something you need from me?" I was stunned. Then I turned to look at the ashtray on the nearby table, overflowing with cigarette butts. After a pause, I asked, "I heard you haven't been to the company for a long time. What's wrong with you lately?" "Go." Luke was silent for a moment. Then he lowered his eyes and said indifferently, "I haven't been feeling well lately, so I want to rest at home for a while." I finally couldn't hold back. I stepped forward and hugged Luke. He froze in place, not moving. Luke's pleasant, cool scent filled my nostrils. I rubbed my tear-stained face on his clothes, thinking that I still shouldn't look too bad when I eventually lifted my head. After he came to his senses, Luke seemed to want to push me away. He was much stronger than me. If he really tried, he could definitely push me off, but he didn't. He let me hold him, then gave a wry smile and said, "Jennifer, stop playing with me. I'm human too, and I get sad." I didn't let go. Luke stood there for a long time, then sighed softly a moment later. Even someone as rational as him was willing to let indulgence and emotion take over for once. He let himself uncontrollably hug me back, his voice filled with barely suppressed emotion. "I actually thought about it. If I hadn't taken you out that day, would you have been able to deceive me a little longer?" Hearing this, I suddenly looked up at Luke, shook my head seriously, and said, "You're overthinking it. You couldn't have." Luke's movements stiffened. He came back to his senses, withdrew his hand, and smiled apologetically at me. Indeed, I was just wishful thinking. I nodded in agreement. Yes. Luke fell silent. I couldn't resist leaning closer to his neck and sniffing again, exclaiming, "What brand of perfume did you switch to recently?" "It smells so good. I just want to hold you and not think about anything else." Luke was silent for a moment before saying, "It's a new company product, a trial." "Oh." I nodded, then said to him, "I'm sorry. I lied to you before, and I've thought of a way to compensate you." When Luke heard my apology, his tone softened, and he said, "It's okay. I don't actually mind you lying to me. As for compensation," he paused. He lowered his eyes, hiding the sadness within, and only somewhat helplessly stroked my head as I leaned against his chest. "No compensation is needed, as long as you're happy. Let's not see each other again in the future. Indeed, emotional compensation is the most unnecessary. Luke lacks nothing. The only thing he wants cannot be compensated by anything." I'm still quite rebellious. I just ignored Luke's words, looked up and bit hard on his collarbone. Luke frowned and groaned, and I happily leaned close to his ear and said, "No, I must compensate you. As compensation, I'll marry you, okay, Luke?" Luke instinctively wanted to refuse, but the next second he was stunned after hearing what I said. He looked at me in disbelief, his voice trembling. "You can't just say such things!" I smiled at him. "Of course I know. My dad has already agreed, so I'll marry you as compensation for tricking you, okay?" The huge house suddenly seemed to become noisy. The traffic outside the window, the chirping of insects in the trees, and the deafening heartbeat like a drumstick. The next second, Luke suddenly lowered his head and kissed me. "I'll give you everything as a betrothal gift." During the engagement, my brother always had a sour face. He still didn't like Luke very much. When Luke toasted him, he reluctantly raised his glass and clinked it. Luke smiled politely and didn't say much. I threatened my brother next to him. I'm getting engaged. If you keep making a sour face, I'll tell Dad. He ignored me. Even though it was an engagement, the ceremony was grand. There were several tables set up. Guests had to go around and toast and say blessings. By the time it was Luke's and my turn to exchange engagement rings on stage, we were both exhausted from toasting. The engagement rings were a pair of diamond rings from my mother's jewelry box. The rings had a unique design, with a tiny, exquisitely beautiful butterfly carved into the hollowed-out upper right corner. We mustered our energy and exchanged rings. Just as we were about to step off the stage, a sudden gasp echoed through the venue. I paused, bewildered. Looking down, I saw a white butterfly perched on the edge of my ring. I don't know when it got there. It gently flapped its wings, as if bringing the most sincere blessings. In a daze, a sudden summer breeze picked up, and I heard a familiar voice from afar. Be happy. Finally, someone will love you for me. After a few seconds, the white butterfly fluttered away again. This time, it flew towards the free and vast sky without looking back. The entire venue was silent. At this moment, there was no doubt. Everyone present knew that this was a destiny witnessed by heaven itself.